This episode of the Lunch with Chris show is brought to you by my upcoming book, 30 Days to Limitless. You can find out more about it at limitless30.com.
This podcast is certified fresh. Freshmediaworks.com.
Welcome to Lunch with Chris. We're your host, Chris Daly, brings you uplifting interviews with extraordinary individuals making a positive impact. Join as he introduces remarkable people who have left their mark on their respective fields.
Have you ever thought about doing your own podcast? It is the absolute best way to grow your brand, spread your message, and build your following. Fresh Media Works can help. We do all the heavy lifting, and you just focus on your message. To find out how easy we can make launching your new podcast, call 713-269-4620 or check us out at freshmediaworks.com.
My next guest is somebody I've known for a very long time, a fellow OG podcaster. Yeah, he has done it all. He spent his whole career in Silicon Valley before it was big Silicon Valley that everybody knows about now. His title now is Futurist. Yeah, that's a real thing. This is Chris Kalaboukis. All right, everybody join me in welcoming Chris Kalaboukis. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Sweet. Good to see you. Good to talk with you again.
Yes, because we're doing this not through video, just audio.
That's right. That's right. Although we may use some of these clips, so no picking your nose.
Okay, I'll make sure not to do that. The sound of that in the mic is going to be pretty awful, but
right. Yeah. So before we get into what you're doing and what you have for the future, being a futurist, I know that's important, but I want to go back in time. Tell me where you grew up. Tell me your background.
Oh, so I am Canadian. I actually grew up in Toronto. I'm trying to stop saying the word actually. So I used to do this on my old podcast, is that when I said a word that I didn't want to hear, or I didn't want to hear myself saying, I would say, tell me when it happens. I would tell my listeners, so here's the word I want to stop saying. And I would say, I told my listeners to email me with the time on the show when I said the word, and the first person who did it would get a free large pizza mailed to their house or delivered to their house. So that worked in the past. I don't know if it'll work today, but
well, does it count if I point it out in the show here?
Yeah, sure. I'll send you a pizza, no problem. I grew up in Toronto. I grew up in Toronto in one of the suburbs of Toronto. In fact, the same suburb that what's that guy's name from Kids in the Hall? No, the dude from
Dave
from Wayne's World. The guy from Wayne's World. Whatever. I'm getting old now. I'm forgetting things. So Mike Myers. So I grew up in the same suburb that Mike Myers grew up in. In fact, I think he lived a few blocks away from where I lived, and I was always interested in the future. I mean, I remember from very, very early days, I used to sneak under the covers with my flashlight and read science fiction novels, talking about how great the future was going to be, how awesome things were going to be. Huge Star Trek fan. So I'm like looking at this future and going, I want to create that future. I really, really want to get into it. So that's why I turned it into kind of my profession. I didn't even know there was a profession of futurist at the time. I thought, wow, this is cool. I get to think about the future all the time and actually try and make it happen. So that kind of took me into that progression, and ended up getting into tech, because I actually had a couple of options. At one point, I thought about getting into film and sort of creating my visions that way. Another one was getting into architecture, because I love buildings and building things. And I eventually made it into sort of like the futurist game, and that's basically writing about and thinking about the future. So I love doing that. I was in Toronto until I was, I don't know, in my 30s, and I thought to myself, so Wired Magazine? You remember Wired Magazine?
Oh yeah.
So I used to read Wired Magazine religiously. And there was this bookstore called This Ain't the Rosedale Library, where I would go and sit there and read the magazine without buying it, because I was a poor teenager. And I would go, this is great. I really, really want to do this. It gave me a taste for Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually 2 or 3 jobs later, I was actually working for a cable company in Canada called Shaw Communications, which was recently bought by Rogers. And they had a gig for internet. They were creating internet service, a home internet service. So, the Xfinity stuff that we have today?
Yeah.
So it was the very first internet trial or high-speed internet trial in Canada. And I got involved. I was already working for Shaw in a different capacity, but then I moved into the department which was doing the internet work. So we were involved in the very initial internet trials in Canada, high-speed internet. So internet was starting to explode. This was in 95 or something like that. And I distinctly remember there was one day when all of the executives from these companies were going to go down to Silicon Valley to meet with people here because at the time there was a company called At Home that was providing the internet infrastructure for cable companies. So they would work with cable companies to provide the internet infrastructure because the cable companies would provide the cable infrastructure and At Home would provide the internet infrastructure, as in email servers, web servers, all the back-end router stuff. So we came down here and it was really interesting because we met with Yahoo. So I met Jerry Yang back in 1995 and I wish I would have asked him for a job then.
Right.
But it was this craziest thing because here's a bunch of Canadian executives from cable company in their suits and ties and everything. And we're walking into this back of the Beyond industrial unit. And as soon as I walk into it, there's a woman with a giant dog on her lap and a giant Unix workstation surfing. And that was her job. She was a web surfer because she was looking for things to put into the directory. And then you turn to the right and there's this tiny little conference table. And we went into this conference room and then Jerry Yang comes out and he's got ripped jeans, ripped t-shirt. And we're talking to this multimillionaire across the desk from us. And he goes, "Oh, if you want drinks, go over there." And opened up the fridge and there was full of Jolt Cola. Remember Jolt Cola?
Oh, yeah.
By any chance?
That was deadly.
It's like Coke with 4 times the amount of caffeine or something like that, right? And I thought, this is amazing. This is so cool. And then during that trip, I also ended up visiting Fry's Electronics. And if you're familiar with Fry's, it was sort of like the electronics mecca. And I still remember it. That's the moment it hit me where we visited Fry's. Oh, somebody said, "Oh, you got to visit Fry's. This is the place to go if you're into tech." So I'm standing there, and people are looking at the motherboards. There's like motherboards spread out, and there's guys there. There's all these guys there, and they're standing there, and they're talking tech, and they're talking this and that. And one guy was talking about how he pulled over to the side of the road because he was a Unix administrator, and he had to reboot a server, using Telnet on his phone. And I thought to myself, I am among my people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I've got to get down here somehow. So I started looking for work in Silicon Valley, and I ended up working for a little tiny web design firm back in the late 90s, late 98. They ended up coming down here and doing the sort of technology work because at that time websites were just straight HTML, graphics, nothing else, no interactivity whatsoever. So we hired the first team to build an engineering back end. So it would be an online catalog and like really simple stuff, sort of like predating WordPress, CMS type of things. And it was all done in Perl and Tomcat and stuff like that. So all these different kinds of technologies. And we worked with FedEx, we worked with Cooper Lighting, we worked with a bunch of different companies all over. But at that time, we were charging $1 million for a single web page. It was insane. It's like, because they didn't know anything about it. They looked at HTML and they thought, wow, that is just gibberish. I can't figure that out. So here's these marketing folks at FedEx going, "Oh, sure, let's these guys are in Silicon Valley. They know all this stuff. Let's, they charging us $1 million for web page. No problem." Right?
Jeez. So
I was there for a while, and then eventually, funnily enough, I actually ended up at Yahoo working, and I like, next time I met Jerry Yang, I thought to myself, "You don't remember me, do you?" But I ended up working at Yahoo and running their innovation program. And that's when I finally got into a role that was really more along the lines of what I was looking for. Right. So the role was taking grassroots innovation. So it was creating a program so that anybody within the organization who wanted to tell us about sort of cool new ideas and products that they wanted to come out with, we'd aggregate them into a site, and then people could vote on it, like Reddit, right? So I'd say, here's an idea for creating a site all around religion. Vote up, down. Here's a site all about pets or whatever. So people would come up with ideas, and we had all sorts of crazy things like mashing up music and dating and all that stuff. Because at the time, Yahoo had a bunch of different properties, and the idea was, how can we figure out what new ones to create or how to create mashups between them? And that I did that for about 2.5 years. And then what ended up happening is that what ends up happening in most organizations, people don't want to do the innovative stuff, right? Because it's either going to upend the stuff that they're already doing, or they go, well, where's the money in it? Or what can you do about it, et cetera? There's no way around it.
When was this? What time frame now?
Well, that was in 2004.
Okay.
So 2004 to 2009, that's when I was and that's exactly around the time I started podcasting.
I was going to say, that's what I was trying to figure out when that came in.
This was in parallel because it was really interesting because at the time I was podcasting. So at the same time as I was doing this gig where we were looking at running the innovation program, I started podcasting, and I would do it from my car on my way to work. So what I would do is at first I just used my Trio 650. Do you remember the Trio 650s? Yeah. So I had a Trio 650.
This is like a trip down memory lane between the hours I spent at the Fry's. I love this stuff.
So so I had a Trio 650, and I plugged it in. I had it in the passenger seat, and I would just record it. And it was whatever length it was from the time I left my house to the time I got to the office. And then when I got to the office, I would upload it to my machine, and then I would post it. And some people at Yahoo got wind of it, and they said, "Wow, you should probably do something for us. Maybe you can help us with our podcast," because they were thinking about setting up their own podcast site. And I remember they sent me to what's that? There's a film festival in Utah. I forget the name of it.
Sundance?
Yeah, they sent me to Sundance one year to actually record celebrities in our podcast booth.
Love that.
And unfortunately, all they did was get me to set it all up. And then they said, okay, here come the celebrities. Okay, you can go back home now. It's all set up. So I missed Paris Hilton by that much.
That much.
But what happened was, it was really interesting because I actually got contacted by Cron TV. Or some local TV station here. And they said, "Oh, we hear you're the guy who does podcasts from his car on the way to work. We'd like to do a story on you." And I'm like, nice. Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. So one day they actually met me at home, and they sat in the back seat filming me. By that time, I had graduated to having a laptop on the set. So I figured to myself, well, this is stupid. I have to put it on my Trio, then I have to copy it from my Trio to my laptop, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you just bring my personal laptop and record it straight into my personal laptop? And so the one time they followed me to the office, and I was recorded my show, and then they did a little interview afterwards, and all the Yahoo folks were like, "Oh yeah, this is interesting. You should, we'll definitely get this on." And the damn thing never aired.
Oh no! Yeah, that's funny. That sounds like one of the shows I do is called The Marketing Drive, and it's named because I record it while I'm driving to and from clients and things like that.
Oh, nice.
Whatever pops into my head, I'll record, on the subject of marketing. Sometimes it's 3 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes. But
nice. Did you ever swear at other drivers? Because I used to do that as well.
No, I'm not a driver. I'm gonna laugh at other drivers. Like, that was ridiculous. I'm not a swearer while I drive.
Yeah. So it was funny because I would be talking up a storm, and then all of a sudden I'd be just like, "Oh, you bastard!" Blah 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 blah.
Right.
And because this was podcasting, you could say anything you wanted, right? Exactly. And it was fine, right? And so then whatever happened. Do you remember Adam Curry?
Of course,
initially came up with the concept, right?
Yeah.
So he had a show called Pod Show. Pod Show, I think, was the name of the company. And he contacted me and said, "Hey, you want to be on? You want to be on here? We'll pay you if you bring in enough audience." Yeah. And I said, "Yeah, that's great. I'll do that." So I moved all of my content to them, and they even featured me a couple times, and that's the time I was kind of doing a political podcast. It was sort of like the, don't listen to Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity or all those people. Listen to me because I'm the future of talk radio, right? Yeah, that went over really well. But
yeah. Which is why you're known as a futurist, not a talk radio guy.
Yeah, I've kind of that ship sailed, right? So I was at Yahoo at the same time as I was doing the show. So and the show was just kind of like it went off on its own rails, and I had actually quite a big audience at the time. I thought, and eventually, now I'm not sure which path you want to take, but eventually I ended up switching. So this is kind of how I got into the professional futurist side of things. Is that one of the problems at Yahoo was that, and this is a problem that all companies have, so it's not a specific Yahoo problem. It's like I was saying before, it's hard to get these innovative ideas out the door, especially if they're too close to what you're doing now. So I thought there's something wrong here. We're not coming up with anything really different and innovative. So that was around the time of the Yahoo's 10th anniversary. And they came out with this folder saying, hey, this is what we did 10 years ago. This is what are we going to do in the next 10 years? And I thought, perfect. Instead of thinking about what we're doing now, why don't we think about what we're going to do next? Why don't we think about where we're going to be in 10 years? And at the time, I hooked up with an organization called the IFTF, the Institute for the Future. And they had these things called 10-year scenarios where they would say, in 10 years, this is what the world's going to be like. So it would create these scenarios.
Nice.
And I thought, well, what if we apply that 10-year scenario to what we're doing? So instead of thinking about things that we can build now, think about things we can't build now, but we can build in 10 years. And this was in 2007. And that's, I started the Yahoo Futurist program where we were doing the exact same thing, except we're saying, this is not for today. This is for 10 years from now. And we created things like the initial things of augmented reality. So they called it transparent virtual reality. So it was just like transparent virtual reality goggles, but it was transparent, so you could see the world through it. So it was basically augmented reality. And we created, and all of this stuff went into the patent pipeline, and we delivered a crap load of patents for Yahoo on these different things. And a lot of these things, some of these things are actually coming, they're already here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, the Apple Vision Pro is almost exactly the same thing that we envisioned back in 2007 when we first did this. So it's just amazing to see these. It's unfortunate to see these things coming to light so late, because you think, I came up with this in 2007. Why is it taken all the way to 2024 before it actually turns into a real product? But that's how slow things actually go, right? Things actually work.
Yeah. So I guess tell me how that segued into what you're doing now. And explain what you're doing now.
So what I'm doing now, and this is a podcast I basically do for fun, is the future, think future. So quick wrap up to that last story. So probably around 800, episode 800, 850 or something like that, all of a sudden Podshow just disappeared. Yeah. So I didn't have any more income from them, and I lost all my programming. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to stop. So I just stopped, and I forget exactly when this was. And at the same time, sort of you got the YouTube steamroller coming in and going, well, podcasting is not going to be as popular as YouTube. And at the time, I didn't really want to do YouTube. Right. So I said, okay, I'm just going to put this on the shelf, and I might come back to it later. And then about 11 years ago or so, like in 2013, I thought to myself, I want to get back into this but I want to focus. I don't want to focus on politics. I want to talk about that's too hairy. I want to focus on the things that I'm really interested in, and that's in the future, right? So I ended up starting it in 2013, and every show I start with every time I start a new show, I start with the same topic: innovation is dangerous, or how thinking about new things is dangerous to the status quo, and how it's really difficult for you to talk about new things because everyone's afraid that, oh my God, things are going to change. But since everybody hates change. So it ended up going down the path of not only the future, but also talking about startups and also talking about change and human beings and things like that. So I because I also have a philosophy background, I have a philosophy degree as well So I bring the philosophy background into it. So there's some tech, there's some philosophy, there's some futurism, there's startups, there's all sorts of stuff in there. And of course, lately for the last year, I've been doing a lot of focusing on AI because I think that's going to be a key thing that sort of combines all of this stuff together that makes it really powerful. And I forgot your question.
No, that's fine because I thought of other ones. But no, you mentioned the fear of change, and the horse and buggy drivers feared, when the vehicle came out. Just like everybody right now is panicked over AI. There's a whole bunch of people who think, oh no, that's the end. But but I guess talk about that, the need to change with it if you don't want to get left behind.
Oh yeah. And it's, you kind of look back at all technological change. So whenever we've had any kind of technological change, when we're ahead of it, we're like, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's going to happen. It's the end of the world. Right. But then when we're behind it, we're like, oh my God, that was the best thing that could have happened. It's amazing. Everything's wonderful. And this happened with everybody. I mean, think about the internet for a second, right? I mean, the commercialization of the internet, obviously the internet has been around since the 60s, but the commercialization of the internet in the 90s, was the last major technological bump. I mean, you could argue that there was others in between, like, for example, the introduction of smartphones and things like that. But if you think about the internet, think about how many jobs the internet has created. Millions, billions, right? But before that, we were thinking, oh my God, the internet's going to destroy all these jobs. Go back to 1992 and try to put up an ad for a web designer, right? Like people are like, what is a web designer, right? So we can't conceive.
But that's why you got $1 million for doing a website.
Exactly.
and now there are 100 million marketers.
Yeah, exactly. We can't conceive of what's going to happen on the other side of that technological change. But every single time that it's happened in the past, it's always been better for us.
Yes.
So we just have to ride it out and look at it from an optimistic viewpoint and go, you know what? There's something better behind this. And I think people can start to see that as long as we use this in the correct ways, then we will get a lot of really good stuff out of it. I mean, we'll get a lot of crap too. I mean, I was just reading an article today about how Amazon's being flooded with AI generated books. And not only are they AI generated books, they are AI generated books that are copies of other AI books that people have written. So this I think Fei Wei or something like that, really prominent AI researcher. And she wrote a book on AI, and somebody took the exact same cover, the exact same title, the exact same description, and it generated the entire book with AI and posted it on Amazon and is garnering the sales off her book. And I'm like, oh my God.
Crazy days. Yeah. So now I could be wrong, but I'm assuming you didn't inherit billions of dollars. So how does this pay? How do you sustain yourself from just sitting around thinking about the future?
Well, I have a day job, and I think a lot of people out there have day jobs as well. And I do product management work for Marriott, the hotel chain, and I'm starting to bring some of these sort of futurist innovation things into the company. And a lot of these organizations it takes a lot of effort to try and get these new ideas in there. And I'm not going to say anything about it. This is obviously completely my opinion. So, but the stuff that I think is fun is where things are going and how we can deal with it as humans, right? And one of the things I want to do is try and keep people optimistic about where things are going, because there's so many people who are so pessimistic about how things are going. Things are just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse, even though statistically things are getting better, and we're just being inundated by all this negativity, and it's hard to see through the negativity and go, you know what, there's something beyond that's actually going to be good. Excellent.
And I'm going to take advantage of my position here of being able to ask a futurist a question. You mentioned the negativity. There's so much negative out there in the media. And obviously, I'm a big fan of the podcast world. But
Mhm.
where do you see the future of media and news?
Well, see, the biggest problem, and I think the reason why I was trying to figure this out when prior to the generative AI thing. Do you remember Tay and these other AI bots that they were bringing out every now and then?
Yeah.
And all of these bots were terrible. They would launch the bot, and then it would turn into a spewing Nazi bot, right?
Exactly.
Like within like minutes or something like that. It was awful because they were training these bots on the internet.
Right. On what people responded to.
That's the problem, is that you can't you can't train bots on the wide internet because of a couple of things. So one is it's ingrained into the human psyche that negative things catch our attention more than positive things.
Right.
It's like you cannot get around that, right? So if negative things get more attention, then people are going to produce more negative things, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're going to get more attention, because people crave attention, they crave followers, they crave attention. So the internet has created this attention economy where everybody is screaming out at each other, vying for attention.
Yeah.
So the more negative, the more outrageous, the more crazy you can be, the more attention that you'll get. Right? So human beings create all of this negative energy and throw it onto the internet to try and grab as much attention as possible, even if they're personally very optimistic. Or, I mean, some of the stuff that you see on the internet, you think somebody would actually say that to someone's face? Never, right? Never. So that's why. And then you take something like a chatbot and you try to train it on the internet, which is geared to negativity and geared to attention seeking. You're not going to get what human beings are really like. So human beings on the internet are not really like that. You have to look at it from people aren't really like that. So if there was some way to get back to the person-to-person connectivity where people are talking to each other, and the anonymity thing is one of the big pieces, right? Because if you can sit behind anonymity, then you can say pretty much whatever you want. But if somebody knows who you are and they know the kind of person that you are, and you're talking to them face to face or in a group, then people are definitely going to be much more polite. They're not going to be as negative. They're going to be nicer. And we just need to figure out some way of making that happen again. And that doesn't answer your question, does it? You're talking about the future of podcasting.
Right. Well, not just the future of media in general, and maybe again, we've talked enough that, I instantly think about business opportunities.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe there is a business opportunity there for positive. It may not be as profitable as the negative, but there's probably something there.
Definitely. There's absolutely something there, but the problem is, how do you get people to it? Yeah. Because it is so easy to get people's attention attached to negative things. Yeah. It's very difficult. It's a lot more difficult to get people's attention attached to positive things. And I think it has something to do with a lot of it has to do with the discovery mechanisms we have. And I think it was sad. I remember reading a story the other day that most people access the internet through 5 websites. That's it. So they won't go directly to your site or my site. They'll go to Google, or they'll go to Facebook, or they'll go to something in between. And these arbiters in between us are the ones who are choosing what we get to see, because there's too much stuff out there. In the olden days, it was much easier to get your word out because there was less stuff out there, and the arbiters weren't so picky about what to show you and what not to show you. Right. And now the arbiters are super picky about what they get to show you and not to show you. So if they know that you like this kind of content, then that's the kind of content you're going to get. Yeah. And if there was some way we could either help the arbiters change that overall, then that would be great. But other than maybe creating a completely new search engine, which works through some other methods, I mean, I'm not sure how the optimistic messages will get out. But I think we will see more of it. I think if more people start focusing on that, then people are going to see more of that in the stream, because it's kind of like people are starting to get tired of it. You're seeing it now on X and other social media. They're like, I'm going to block that because I don't want to read any political news, or I don't want to read any of this news, or I don't want to read any of that news, because if this is all negative, 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 I don't want to read it anymore. So people are starting to do that, and it's up to us to go in and say, I only want to read the good stuff. I don't want to read the bad stuff. So I think we need to create more of those sources. We need to create more of that optimistic content.
Being a marketer, I blame marketers for all of it, because think back to the early days of search engines, Yahoo and Alta Vista and all those.
Yep.
It was whatever was on the page. Yep. So then marketers came in and cheated and put the same words over and over and over, or hid things behind it. So they, they just ruined it.
It's all marketers' fault, damn it.
It always is.
But that's the thing about marketing and any kind of communication and sales. You have to, look at the human psyche and go, what does the psyche want? And at the base level in our dinosaur brain, we're freaked out about negative things. And that's what grabs our attention. Even if it's a positive thing, if you can give it a negative spin, all of a sudden people are like totally into it. And I just find that super annoying. And I wish we could get over it. But hopefully that over time we start deciding that we're going to be a more positive force.
Right.
And I think we need to sort of like see an en masse. And I think you're right about, we need to create that positive content. If we create the optimistic content, then and flood the internet with more of it, then people will see more of it. Yeah. And if they see more of it, then it might eventually get to a tipping point where it's kind of like, oh, I want to see more of that because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel good about how things are and where things are going.
Right on. And trying to keep it positive. Let's switch to AI. And we're not going to talk about what's wrong with AI.
I'm a positive guy for AI. I totally
exactly. But what do you see as the big things that are coming down the road? We all talk about deep fake. We all talk about all these things that are kind of negative. But what do you see the big gains are?
Well, it's all in the little stories. Like I told you earlier, I have a sister podcast called AIdaily.us where I go through and curate AI stories every day. So I just look at the last 24-hour news cycle of AI stories. And there's 7 to 10 negative stories. But outside of that, there's always some really, like when you drill down into specific areas, there's positive stories on, say, diagnosis for cancer diagnosis, or there's positive stories on loneliness. So there's positive stories on this. So there's AI is affecting us in all these little ways. And that's the thing about, like I say about news. Like, news is the news because it hardly ever happens. If it happens a lot, then it's not going to show up on the news. So underneath the popular stuff, there's all sorts of stories about how people are applying AI and generative AI to do good things, or to improve things, or to improve people. And I think that's what we need to focus on more, is all of these things that AI can do for us that we couldn't do before. Like, for example, diagnosis, I think, is the really most interesting one, because only so many, if you look at diagnoses of individuals across the board, right? It's so much data. There's millions and millions and millions of diagnoses out there, and nobody can make sense of all of it because it's just too big of a task. But if you took all of this data and you threw an AI onto it, it might be able to find patterns that we wouldn't be able to see, right? Because it could do work much faster than we can. And
I've seen that with brain scans. Yeah, they do a much better job than doctors do.
Yeah. And I read a story just yesterday. They were talking about mammogram diagnosis, right? So it can do the first read right away and go, this is okay. You don't have to do anything deeper. So to be able to get more people to do these kind of things, and AI can just sort of sits there in there and improves these things, but we hardly ever hear about it. But it's a slow wave, but it's happening where it's coming across the board. We only ever hear about the negative stuff, but there's tons of really good things that AI is doing, and especially I think in the social anxiety space as well, because COVID did a number on a lot of people, right? They're like so many more introverts. People are not going out anymore. People are having trouble communicating with other people. We can definitely use AI to help people get out of, like, sort of break out of their shells, maybe do that initial communication to help them be better communicators and be better people to other people. And then eventually sort of teach them to get out into the world and get more back to normal. So there's a lot of things happening on that front. So today there was a story on CES and how there's all these things, all these AI loneliness apps and AI loneliness robots and virtual friends and stuff like that. And they were decrying about how horrible that was. Right. And I think to myself, maybe this is just a sort of a stepping stone to help people have better communications with these objects to get them to talk to other people. Because I think the end result is not us talking to machines. The end result is us getting out there and talking to people again. Because I think we're still under the I don't know, the dark clouds of COVID. Is like people are still feeling socially anxious. People are still don't want to go out as much as they did. We're not back up to the same levels of, hey, let's go out for coffee as we used to be. And we still need to get to that point. So if these tools can help us get there eventually, then I think that's great.
No, I love that. So Chris, tell us how people can find out more about you. What are your websites, your places?
Oh my God, I got a million of them. So
nice.
So my main website for my podcast is thinkfuture.com. So you'll find both the audio and video version there. And then the second podcast that I was talking about before, aidaily.us, is curated by me. So I curate it every day, and it's both. It's a newsletter, also a podcast, also a video. Because I actually started putting it on YouTube, and very simply, I got quite a few views. I was surprised at what gets views on YouTube. I would just throw it up there, and I did zero marketing.
Right.
I thought, let me just put it on YouTube and see what happens.
Well, AI is hot. Yeah.
The funniest thing was that I put something up and then I just left it for a week. I didn't do anything because I thought, I'm going to see if anybody's going to watch this. I come back and look at it a week later. It's like 1,000 views. I'm like,
nice.
It's like one video on one channel. And it was about Grok, the AI from X.
Well, that's important. That's newsjacking. That's you grab something that people are talking about right now.
Yeah, because I have another one where I just posted it a couple of days ago, and I got like 4 views. So it totally depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
If you talk about Sam Altman or AI or OpenAI or Elon Musk, then you're going to get views, right?
Right. I love it. I love it. So is that it? You have other places?
No, that's pretty much it. aidaily.us or thinkfuture.com. And then that'll lead you to other places. So
Sweet. Well, Chris Kalaboukis, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me. And it's great to talk with you as usual.
Great talking with you as well. We have to do this again.
Of course.